All right, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to part 5, the concluding part of a 5-part series that we have called From This Day Forward. I'm excited you all are here today. Today, honestly, as I look at the 5 different parts of this series, today is obviously, it's kind of the capstone, kind of the culmination, but today is really the most important week of this series. And so I'm excited that you're here. Now, throughout this series, we've kind of let you know that the big ideas for this series were taken out of a book called From This Day Forward by Pastor Craig Groeschel, and we let you know that because my hope is that if you have found this series useful to you, helpful to you in your marriage or in any relationship capacity at all, I would really encourage you to pick up a copy of the book From This Day Forward. There's all kinds of stuff in there, different exercises and things that we obviously are not doing here. And my hope is that if this has been helpful to you, that you can use that as a resource at home. Our goal is not just to help you on Sundays. Our goal is to help you every day of your life. And so if you found this useful, I would encourage you to grab a copy of that book. You can find it on Amazon or wherever else. And I wish I was getting paid to say that, but I'm not. So it's awesome. It's a great resource. Use it. And throughout this series, we've kind of asked this big question: are great relationships possible? Are great relationships possible? And we say unequivocally, yes, they are. Great relationships and great marriages are possible, but they're not probable unless we do things in a different way from kind of the common way of doing things. And so really, if you're here and you're not yet married, but hope to be one day, our goal in this series is very simply to give you the tools that you need now on the front side of marriage to hopefully avoid some major problems down the road, because marriage is hard. And if you are already married, our hope, or what we're trying to do, is make 5 commitments together that can reverse the odds. Statistics say 50% of marriages end in divorce. And just being a pastor, doing people work for basically my whole life, I know this, that the statistics say 50% of marriages end in divorce, but a significantly higher percentage of marriages end up miserable. And that's sad, but it's true. A lot of people, even those that stay married, if they don't get divorced, they end up in just kind of this like, yeah, I mean, we're married. We're like, God bless, we stayed married for 70 years. But they aren't really happy. And so our goal, our hope, is that for those who are already married, that we can make 5 commitments together that will fail-proof our marriages and give us great marriages. I would also just add quickly that these principles, they can apply in some ways to any relationship. So they're definitely helpful no matter what. And these are the 5 commitments that we're making together. We've gone through these every week in this series. We've made a commitment. We're just going to walk through these really fast. They're in your message notes. The first commitment we made together was to seek God, to seek God. We said we will seek the one with our 2. God is our 1 and our spouse is our 2. The second commitment we made together is a commitment to fight fair. Fight fair. We said healthy couples fight for resolution. Unhealthy couples fight to win. The third commitment we made together is a commitment to have fun. Have fun. We said in any healthy relationship, and especially in marriages, fun is necessary. And we talked through 3 types of fun every marriage has to have. Last week, Pastor Mike Durst brought a fantastic message on the commitment we need to make to stay pure. To stay pure. That every marriage has to have a foundation of purity in it. And then today we're making this fifth commitment together to never give up. Never give up. Now, as we get started this morning, I'm going to take a poll. We've done some polls the last few weeks, and people have been a little apprehensive, like, it's okay if you raise your hand in church, it's okay. So here's what I need. I need you, get ready, prep for it, because I'm gonna ask a participatory question, okay? How many of you that are currently married, or maybe just in a relationship of any kind that matters to you, how many of you would say that significant other, spouse or otherwise, is very different from you? Just very different. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. That's amazing. I actually did not expect for it to be quite that overwhelming, but it was. That's fantastic. So there's this interesting thing that happens in that you've heard the phrase, I'm sure, opposites attract. And it's true. So here we go. A little bit more participation, okay? Which of you in the relationship are the one that you're very punctual with your time? You when you got to be, you're there. How many of you are a little more creative? Just a little more creative, we'll just kind of get there. We'll get there when we get there. Yeah, okay, good. How many of you, if you're going to go on a trip, you plan the trip? You have a spreadsheet detailing what time you're going to be at what gas station on the way, right? How many of you kind of spin a bottle and then when it points in a direction, you just go until it runs out of gas, right? Okay. How many of you are savers? Like you love to save money? Savers? Really? There's not very many savers? Hey, ushers, take note. Watch this. How many of you are spenders? You just like to spend. You like to spend money. My wife and I, unfortunately, are both spenders, and it is bad. Don't marry. If you're a spender, listen, let me give you some of the best advice I could ever give you. If you're single and you're a spender, don't marry another spender. Like first date, ask the question, do you like to spend money or do you like to save money? If you're a spender, find a saver. So my wife and I are extremely different individuals. Like, I mean, completely different. So as a part of our growth track that we take people through, we're very passionate about helping people find their God-given purpose in this world. One of the ways we do that is we actually give a personality assessment to everyone to help people understand their wiring a little bit better. And so the assessment we use is called the DISC, D-I-S-C. And if you have any kind of background or knowledge of psychology, you may be at least a little bit familiar with that. DISC, D-I-S-C, it identifies 4 different types of personalities or different leadership traits. My wife and I spell DISC. Like, I'm a D-I and she's an S-C. Like, we spell DISC. I mean, we are complete opposites. If you like Myers-Briggs, we are complete opposites in every one of the Myers-Briggs. We are total complete opposites. Now, it was interesting because when we first got married, we knew we were very different. We knew we were very opposite. But for those who are married, you can know you're different, but then when you get married, you find out you're real different. and you find this out in interesting ways. I remember shortly after we got married, my wife, I just have to say this up front, my wife is a phenomenal cook. Like, she is amazing. And if you doubt that, you can ask my parents. We've been living with my parents for the last 11 months while our house in Kentucky is attempting to sell. And so she's been cooking, and it's great. My parents have often joked about how when we move out, they're going to hire her to come in and cook because they eat great all the time. She's an amazing cook. And so as we were preparing to get married, I knew she was a great cook, and she cooked for me a lot. But then shortly after we got married, we had an incident. And she was going to make us sloppy joes one night, which I love. I mean, who doesn't love a good sloppy joe sandwich, So we're getting ready, and she's getting the stuff out, and I see this can on the counter that says Manwich. And I looked at it, and I said, "What's that?" "Well, that's sloppy joe." No. That's not sloppy joe. That's Manwich. That's grossness in a can. No, that's sloppy joe. We're having sloppy joe. That's the sloppy joe. No. That's not sloppy joe. Yeah, that's sloppy joe. Wait, you're telling me that you grew up eating Manwich instead of sloppy joe? Yeah, that's sloppy joe. That's not sloppy joe. That's Manwich. Well, that's what my mom always made. Well, your mom made it wrong. My mom makes it better than your mom. Like that's how that kind of, no, I didn't, I might have said that. Don't ever say that in a marriage. But we had this there's just differences, right? And that's a ridiculous and it's a silly example, but isn't that the way it goes? Like when you get married, you begin to discover little things about the other person that maybe you didn't even know. Because we're all different. And in relationships, often opposites attract. But there's a problem, and the problem is this, that often opposites attract in relationships. But then have you ever heard the phrase that when you get married, opposites attack? Because that's kind of the way it goes. Because what happens is there's this interesting thing where all the things that were really cute when you didn't have to live with them now become frustrating when you're around them all the time and can't get away from them. And so little things like we still go on and on about which way is the proper way to put the toilet paper roll on the dispenser. There's not an argument. It's over the top. Like it's the top. And anybody who says it's underneath, you're wrong, and you need to stop. But this is what happens, right? Like all the little cute things then become repeated over and over, and they become frustrating. Now, the interesting thing about this is that our differences don't have to actually lead to negative things, but often they do. There's a progression that happens, and I want to show this to you. Our differences that we have in relationships just start out as differences. This isn't in your notes. This is just for you guys to see. Our differences always start out as differences. But then eventually our differences move on to be disagreements, don't they? Our differences become disagreements. Then what happens is our disagreements become fights, right? In week 2, we talked about fighting fair, and we talked about the fact that every couple fights. Every couple fights. But there's a distinct difference between the way healthy couples fight and unhealthy couples. And I want to show this to you today. You see, healthy couples fight for resolution. And when a healthy couple fights for resolution, a disagreement or a difference becomes a disagreement, becomes a fight, becomes a resolution, and then it cycles back. And what happens is in that healthy relationship, you begin to actually become better and healthier as you find resolution. And then as you disagree again, and then you find resolution, and you disagree again, and you find resolution, it strengthens you and it strengthens the relationship. Unhealthy couples do things very differently. You see, after the fight in an unhealthy couple situation where an unhealthy couple fights to win, there can be resentment that comes. And resentment then turns to distance, and distance in turn can lead to hopelessness. And that's kind of a stark, I wanted you to see it kind of laid out there. That might seem a little bit, it might seem a little bit over dramatic. But the reality is many couples, many couples are actually in the right-hand side of that diagram, somewhere in the resentment, distance, hopelessness stage. The problem with that is that that's what leads people to ask that question, like, are great marriages even possible? Because I'm over here and there's just all this distance. And if you're not careful, if you're on that road, if you're not careful, what can happen is you end up with two people living under the same roof who just don't even know each other anymore. And that's a scary and a painful place to be. And it only ever results in one of two things. You either give up and you get out, or you live miserable for the rest of your life. And that was never the way it was intended to be. Often I think people who get to that point, they kind of get to this place where they wonder like, man, how, you think back and you remember, when you were dating or whatever, and you're like, man, we would go to the store and we would go to Hallmark and look at all the cards and like, they all made sense. And all the songs on the radio, like they made sense to us. And like, we wanted to buy stuffed walruses for each other. And like, where'd it go? Where'd it go? But when you're at that point, it's hard to get back out. Now, so for some people though, this even gets heavier, and this is going to get pretty heavy here over the next couple minutes, and we're going to bring it back from that. But for some people, it's even worse. For some people, you're at this point where you go, well, I'm trying, and they're not. Like, I'm really trying because I don't like where we are, and I want to get back where we were, and I'm trying, and they are not. And there is a hopelessness that is just consuming when you're at that place. And what happens is this pain from years and years of not being healthy leads to misery, and it's just awful. And if you're in that spot, I just want to say to you right now, before we dig in any deeper, there is hope. Like, it can get better. There is hope. For some people, it's even worse than that. And I have to address this. I don't want to address this, but I have to address it. Because as we get into this, I'm going to talk about never giving up. And I'm going to preach hard to you that you never should give up in your marriage. But for some people, it gets to a place where the marriage becomes abusive, whether emotionally, physically, any of those kind of things. What I'm not saying is to stay in a marriage if you're a punching bag. And I hope and pray that nobody in this room is. But that's reality for a lot of people. And if you're just getting worked, then you need to get out. You need to separate. You need to get counseling. You need to try to work through it, but you need to do it separately. And so I just have to throw that out there. I know that's heavy, and that just sets a tone on the room that I don't like. But no matter where your marriage is, no matter your level, maybe you're on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side of that diagram, and you're a healthy couple, and you're just doing great, and your marriage is getting stronger, and you're getting stronger, that's awesome. But if you find yourself on the right-hand side of the diagram, I need you to know before we start, there is hope. There is hope. And so I'm going to preach that to you today and hopefully give you something to hang on to. So to show you why there's hope, I actually need us to back up before we dig into this any deeper. And I want to make sure to start with today that we have the proper view of marriage, because I'm afraid that in our culture, we have an incorrect view of marriage biblically. The problem with that is that if we have an incorrect view of marriage, then even asking the question, is a great marriage possible, is impossible to answer. Because if we're defining marriage differently, we can't answer it in the same way. So here we go. Let me show you this in the book of Matthew. And what happened here, let me just set this up a little bit. Some Pharisees who were like teachers of the law, they were kind of the religious experts of their time. They come to Jesus and they're trying to trap him. And so this is what they do. They say, some Pharisees came to Jesus to test him. And they asked him the question, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Now, this is hard to imagine in our culture today, but at the time, women were viewed as property of a man. Women were viewed as property. So it's like you got your wife and you got your cow and they're just property. They're just like they didn't buy and sell, but if a man decided that he wanted to divorce his wife, he just said, see ya. And the woman had absolutely no kind of recourse, no way to do anything about it. This was especially problematic because, again, in this culture, all of your worth as a person was tied to like land and livestock and a home and things like that. And so when a woman was divorced by a man, she was cast out. Like she had nothing. And the man retained everything. And then to kind of double it, she was seen as damaged goods because she was divorced. So this was really, really problematic. And the Pharisees here are trying to put Jesus in a trap. And Jesus just blows everybody away with his response. And this is what he says. He says, haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, watch this, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. And here's the kicker, for the two will become one flesh. And then the writer of the book repeats it. So they are no longer two, but one. It's interesting to me, as I was reading through this, I had never noticed that the writer of Matthew, he literally wrote the exact same thing, boom, boom. Like Jesus said, they'll be united and the two will become one flesh. And by the way, in case you missed that, the two will become one flesh. Now, he's not saying that like there's no personality things that are different, there's no traits that are different. He's not saying that. If you remember back, if you've been around very long, we've talked about how we are triune beings. We have a body, a soul, and a spirit. And what this is referring to is the spiritual side of us. We obviously still have different physical bodies. We obviously have different emotions and kind of internal mechanisms, personality, things like that. But spiritually, there's something significantly important that's happening when we get married. In God's eyes, we are no longer two distinct individuals spiritually, but we are one individual. We are one. And then so he goes on and he says, therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. And this is absolutely massive. It's absolutely huge. And it gives us a clue as to how God's definition of marriage and our definition is completely different. And so I just want to give this to you. This one's in your notes. God set up marriage in a very different way. And this is God's system. In God's eyes, marriage is a covenant, not a contract. In God's eyes, marriage is a covenant, not a contract. This is absolutely massive. Andy Stanley, who's a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, of one of the largest churches in the country, he always says it this way. He says, you can't unone what God has made one. You can't unone what God has made one. See, what happens is when we get married, in God's eyes, this miracle happens and the two become one spiritually. And this is why divorce is so incredibly painful. Like no matter how amicable the divorce is, there's always pain. It would be like taking two pieces of paper and super gluing those pieces of paper together, like from top to bottom, side to side, super gluing two pieces of paper together to literally make them one piece of paper and then trying to separate them. No matter how hard you try, when you do, there's gonna be rips, there's gonna be tears, there's gonna be little pieces of the one piece still left on the other. And it gets even more painful when kids become a part of the equation because those kids are bound in that spiritual reality as well. And so, no matter what your theological viewpoint on this is, because I know everybody approaches this kind of topic with a different worldview, with a different theological view. No matter your theological view, there's no denying that divorce is painful. Like, how many people do you know who are divorced and would go, "Oh, it was great. I mean, it was fantastic. It was the best thing I've ever been through." I mean, there might be people who would say, "I'm happier today than I was then." There might be people who would say, our marriage was so toxic, we had to get out, we knew it had to end, and it's better now that it's over. But even those people would not deny that it was horrifically painful going through the process. Divorce is painful, and this is why, because in the spiritual realm, the two have become one, because marriage is a covenant, not a contract. So I want to take the next few minutes and I want to kind of define these two terms for us again, because for me, I feel like one of the most important things I can do is bring clarity to things that might not be as clear otherwise. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. So what's a contract? A contract is an agreement based on mutual distrust. A contract is an agreement based on mutual distrust. In 2011, my wife and I moved to Kentucky and we rented an apartment down there. And when we did, if you've ever rented an apartment, you know you have to basically sign your life away. Why? Well, the reason you do that is because you don't trust each other, right? A contract says, I'm in as far as you are in. I don't trust you, therefore, this contract will make sure that if you do something different than what you say you're going to do, I will have legal recourse to actually do something about it. A contract is an agreement based on mutual distrust. Many people approach marriage with this view of marriage. In fact, some people literally do. This is the definition of a prenuptial agreement. It is literally a contract that says, should this dissolve, here's the way this is going to work. And a lot of people think prenups are great because they can avoid pain down the road. But the problem is that means we're defining marriage as a contractual agreement. I'm in as far as you're in. I'll live up to my end of the bargain so long as you do. A covenant is very different. A covenant is an agreement based on mutual commitment. A covenant is an agreement based on mutual commitment. The covenant idea is huge in the Bible. It's everywhere in the Bible. We don't really use it a lot. But the actual word covenant in the Old Testament is the word berith, B-E-R-I-T-H, berith, which literally means a cutting. Okay, I would imagine that if I'd have asked you, what does that word mean? You would not have said, oh, it means a cutting. That's what covenant means. But here's why it meant that. In the Old Testament, when people would make covenants together, what they would do is they would take a bull and they would cut the bull in half down the middle. This is a little gory, so here we go. They'd cut the bull in half down the middle. They would then spread the two halves of the bull out. And then the two parties who were making the covenant together would walk through the middle, literally of like the entrails of the bull. They would walk through the middle 7 times. And as they did, they would say this to one another. They would say, may it be to me as it was to this bull if I were to break my part of the covenant. That's why the word literally means a cutting. Because for them, a covenant was not something that could be broken in this life. In fact, they said, if I break the covenant, may I die like this. Because a covenant was an agreement based on a mutual commitment that was only broken in death. In fact, in marriage ceremonies in the Old Testament, often the ancient Hebrews believed that the life of a person was in their blood. That literally the blood of the person was the life. And so in marriage ceremonies, they would take a knife and very, very gently cut the palm of the hand of the groom and the hand of the bride. So there was just a little bit of blood there. And then they would take the hands and join them together and tie the hands together to symbolize the two different lives becoming one. Because in the Old Testament and in God's view of marriage, there is nothing that can separate the marriage save death. And this is absolutely massive. And so this is why I'm a firm believer in like, don't go down to the courthouse and get married. And if you did, that's fine. But I prefer to say, hey, like go and actually stand in front of a representative of God. Go stand in front of a pastor in a church with your friends and your family and commit to one another. Like, go through it. Go, Andrew, do you take Vanessa to be your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, forsaking all others. Be faithful to her as long as she makes you happy. That's not it. No, sorry. Forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as she fulfills her part of the deal. That's not the way it goes either. As long as nobody better comes along. No, like it's as long as you both shall live. The idea of marriage, very simply, is that marriage is a covenant that cannot be broken until death happens. All right, so This is the way it is. In fact, there's a famous quote. If you're familiar with Billy Graham, the famous evangelist, his wife Ruth, there was an interview done with her some time ago. And, Billy Graham was one of the most famous evangelists of all time. He traveled all over the country. He was gone constantly. And there was a reporter one time that asked Ruth Graham, hey, have you ever thought about divorcing Billy? Like, he's gone all the time, like he's never here. Some estimates say that he was gone as many sometimes as 300 days out of a year. He was not at home. And this reporter said, have you ever thought about divorcing Billy? And Ruth Graham, who kind of was fairly famous for making snarky quotes, Ruth Graham said, I've never thought about divorcing Billy. Murder, yes, but divorce, no. But that's the commitment biblically, that when we talk about marriage, that's what this never give up idea looks like. So how do we actually do that? My goal over the next few minutes as we look to finish up, my goal is to give you an idea of how this actually plays itself out. Now, if you're not married yet, I just want to let you know, this principle that I'm about to teach could be one of the most foundational principles to any relationship that you're ever in your life. Like, this is huge. This is absolutely huge. So let's look at the principles of sowing and reaping found in Galatians 6. This is what it says. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. This would have made initially just tons of sense to Jesus' listeners because they lived in an agricultural society. We don't. And so this sowing and reaping idea doesn't just naturally make sense to us. So here we go. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature, he's going to reap destruction. But the one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. There's two principles of sowing and reaping that I want to kind of capstone this whole series with. And here's the first principle. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. If I plant an apple seed in the ground, I'm not getting an orange. I'm not. It's not going to happen. It's not possible. I'm going to get an apple. Why? Because you reap what you sow. What you plant is what you get. So if you're walking down the street and somebody smiles at you, what are you likely to do? You're likely to smile back. If you're driving along in your car and somebody flips you off, what are you likely to do? You're going to pray for them because you're a good Christian, right? Like you're probably not going to react in the most God-honoring way in that moment. You reap what you sow. In marriage, if you receive grace, compassion, and thoughtfulness from your spouse, how are you likely to respond? If you receive criticism, complaining, and comparing from your spouse, how are you likely to respond? The harvest always begins with the seeds you plant. Some of you need to hear that more than anything else I've said in the last 5 weeks. The harvest always begins with the seeds you plant. If you don't like what you've been getting, you need to look at what you've been giving. If you don't like what you've been getting, you need to look at what you've been giving. Don't point the finger, because often when we hear a message like this, isn't that what happens? You're like, yeah, listen, right? Maybe you're not doing that, which is smart. Don't do that. But I would imagine some of you are thinking that initially. Don't do that. If you don't like what you've been getting, you need to start by what you've been giving. So this is the action we're going to start taking today to never give up. I'll give what I want to get. I'll give what I want to get. That's the way you start not giving up. You start planting that which you want to see in your relationship. If you want patience, love, and kindness, then plant those things in your marriage. If you want patience, love, and kindness, plant those things in your marriage. If you're not married yet, begin planting those things in all of your relationships, because it'll be that much easier one day. The second principle of sowing and reaping is this: you reap where you sow. You reap where you sow. So if I plant a seed right here, I'm not going to get a tree here. I'm not. It's not going to happen. It's not physically possible. If you're planting all of your life into your hobbies, into your career, some of you need to hear this one, into your kids. If you're planting the best of who you are in different arenas of your life, your marriage will not grow. It can't. because you reap where you sow. In part one of this message series, we outlined the fact that God is supposed to be our one and our spouse is supposed to be our two. If anything else takes the spot of number two in your relationship, anything, it'll grow. Like you might become a better golfer. You might become, I love to do woodworking. You might become a better woodworker. You might become a better hunter or a better fisherman. You might become a better parent, but you won't become a better spouse. You reap where you sow. If you don't like the health of your marriage, look where you're giving your life. If you don't like the health of your marriage, look where you're giving the best of yourself. What's getting your time? What's getting your energy? What's getting your money? What's getting your passion? If it's not your spouse, then it will not grow. And so here's the second thing that we're going to do. We're going to make a commitment together to say, I'll sow where I want to grow. I'll sow where I want to grow. Because unless you are sowing intentionally into your marriage, you will sow elsewhere. Like you'll give your life somewhere. You'll give the best of you somewhere. Healthy things grow. Whatever and wherever you sow is where life is going to happen. So plant life in your marriage. Because here's the big hopeful part, right? The end of that verse that I just read to you a minute ago says this. I want to read it one more time. Let us not become weary in doing good. Or if I could make that the from this day forward version, let us not become weary in planting life in our marriages, because at the proper time, we will reap a harvest. If what? If we don't give up. If we don't give up. So you feel like it's frustrated and like it's not working. My question to you is this: could it just maybe be not the right time yet? Is it maybe that you planted a seed, but you're just impatient, right? Because isn't that how we are? We're impatient people. And so often we plant a seed in our marriage, and if we don't see it germinate right now, today, we're like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But could it be that seed might take some time? Healthy things grow. At the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. So never give up, never give up, never give up. My question to you today as we close is this: healthy things grow. At the proper time, you will reap a harvest. What might your harvest be? Like, what might it look like? Because if you're in a place where your marriage is unhealthy, if you're in a place where you're on that road that we talked about earlier, if you're on a road toward hopelessness, toward like where there's just distance and you don't really know how you're going to recover, if you're on that road, my question is this: if you were to begin investing and planting seeds in that relationship now, like really investing and planting, what might it look like when the harvest comes? Because it will. Well, I want to give you some ideas. If you make a commitment to say, hey, we're not where we want to be, so we're going to seek God together. We're going to seek God. We're going to fight fair. We're going to have fun. We're going to stay pure, and we're never going to give up. Like, we're going to make these commitments together because we want now what we once had then. If you'll make those commitments together, here's what'll happen. And this is powerful. Don't miss this. Your pain today will become your story tomorrow. Your pain today will become your story tomorrow. And the harvest that you'll reap one day, and I promise you this, that if you do those 5 things, your marriage will get better. Your relationship will get better. You will find healing. But even more powerfully than that, because this is how incredible our God is, He doesn't just want to heal you for you, and you need to know that. He wants to heal you so that the next person down the road who's struggling can be inspired by your story. If I could use a little bit of churchy language for it, let me say it this way: your story will become your testimony. So I've shared bits and pieces. My wife and I do not have a great story in our marriage. And a few years ago, we were this close to giving up. I mean, we were that close. And I've said it before, and I'm not ashamed of it. We had a 4-month-old daughter at the time. And if we hadn't had that little girl, we wouldn't have stayed together. We were done. But we had this girl that we believed in. And we sat down and we talked and we said, like, what are we going to do? And in the end, it came down to we have her. We have to try to make this right for her. And we went and got help. We got counseling. We found friends who would encourage us and who would walk with us, who we could be real with. And here's the thing about it. is today when I sit down and talk to a couple whose marriage is on the ropes, I can say, no, listen, I don't just believe there's hope because the Bible says there's hope. I believe there's hope because I found hope. Because let me tell you our story, because our story is crazy. I'm giving you the PG version of it. It's an ugly, ugly story. But we found hope and we found healing. And in the end, God called us to this. And it's amazing. And so I stand before you today to say, don't give up. If you feel like giving up, don't give up. If you feel like giving up, don't give up. Because if you don't give up, in the end, you will reap a harvest. Because God is faithful. And he will not let you down. And he will walk with you. And he will heal you. And he will send you people that you don't want in your life because they're going to call you out for the junk you're doing. And you'll find the marriage that you always wanted. And when you do, your story will become your testimony, and you'll be able to say, I have no earthly idea. But look how incredible my God is. Look at how incredible he is for the miracle that he did in us. If you'll bow your heads with me today. God, today we come before you and we're so thankful to you for your word. We're so thankful to you for the Bible that gives us principles, that gives us things we can live by. But God, even more than that, that shows us the best way to live. God, we're thankful that you didn't just give us a book of instructions, but you gave us a book of wisdom that teaches us principles and things that if we apply them to our lives, that frankly, they give us a better life. But God, more than that today, I personally am thankful for your healing work in my life and in my marriage. And God, today, I just want to take this moment to pray for every person here who is struggling, who is relationally worn out, who is tired, who feels like they can't go on. God, I pray that your peace would be on them. God, I pray that your spirit would be present in their lives. God, reach down in this moment and breathe life where there is death. God, give us all the courage and the strength to plant seed where we want to reap a harvest. Give us the strength and the courage to plant what we want to harvest, because we know, especially when we talk about relationships and marriage, it can be so difficult when we come to that place of hopelessness. It can become so difficult to invest back into that which causes us the most pain. And so, God, I pray just for every person in this room who is struggling relationally. God, give us strength and give us courage. God, your word tells us that your strength is made perfect in our weaknesses, that when we can't go on, when we say, I'm done, I'm out, I quit because I can't go on anymore, God, that when we turn to you, you give us supernatural strength. You give us supernatural ability to do that which we cannot do on our own. And so, God, for those who are tired today, I pray your strength. For those who are hopeless today, I pray your hope. God, for those who are at the end of their rope, I pray that you would give them some of yours. God, I pray that we as a church would rally around those who are struggling. God, that we would be a place of hope and healing. And as you keep your heads bowed and your eyes closed, maybe for some of you, those feelings that I've talked about of hopelessness, of despair, of just feeling like you can't go on. You're just surviving every day. You're tired. You're worn out. For some of you, that's the reality of your life every day. And I want to say to you today, there is hope in the name of Jesus. And if you're tired today, if you're worn out, it's because you're doing it on your own and you need the power of God in your life. And you need to start there. And so if that's you and you're tired today and you realize you've been doing it your own way, you've been going it alone, you've been trying to fix this on your own, relying on your own strength and on your own power, but you need the power of God in your life today, would you just slip your hand up for me? It's awesome. It's awesome. I'm going to say a quick prayer for us. If that's you today, would you just say this prayer? There's no magic words. There's no special anything, and it's just a simple prayer. The Bible says that if we believe in our hearts and confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord, that he'll save us, that he'll save us from ourselves and give us hope. So if you would just pray with me. Say, God, today I'm tired. God, I'm weary. I know I've been doing things on my own. And God, it's not working so well. So today, would you come into my life? God, I give you all of me. I surrender everything I am. I give it all to you. God, give me the courage and the strength to live every bit of my life for you. God, as I do, I pray that you would just breathe life into me, that you would give me joy and peace, that you would give me hope. God, send me great people to walk with me so that I can be strong. Thank you for dying on the cross for my sins. Thank you for loving me so much. It's in your name we pray. Amen.